But again, good morning. Welcome to our Teaching Career Preparation Skills Workshop. Today, we're going to be talking about interview skills. Really excited to be joined today by Anna Anderson from MSU FCU. And I will let her introduce herself in a moment. But my name is Samantha Jackson. For those who don't know me, I'm a career readiness consultant here at Kent ISD. And so my role is really to work with our local districts here in Kent County. We have 4 career readiness consultants. Each of us works with specific school districts. I've got them outlined here. If you are in Kent County and you don't see your name listed, that doesn't mean we don't work with you. Just reach out to me and I'd be happy to get you connected to one of our consultants. Even our parochial private schools are definitely served by us as well. Kind of the main part of my job is trying to help schools come up with a K through 12 career readiness plan. So helping students make more informed decisions as they're leaving high school. But we work with schools K through 12. And then another big component is providing professional development to educators. These topics. Oh no, is my sound okay? Someone let me know if you're hearing me okay. Looks like someone's having some challenges. Okay, good, thank you. Sorry, I'm not sure what's going on for our one participant, but this is really important to me. My background is in college career services. So prior to this role, that was my whole professional background. I worked with college students on choosing a major, interviewing resumes, job search, internship search, all of that good stuff. So I was kind of on the other side of this, working with students. And so really excited to be able to give you all some more information to start preparing students a little bit earlier. All right, so really quickly, just like why are we talking about interviewing? So first of all, interviewing is a learned skill, right? I mean, there are some people that are, just naturally good at it, but for most people, it takes a lot of practice to be good at interviewing. Really, I like to think about interviews as a conversation. They really just help us get to, know about and learn about other people. So it is a really good skill beyond just trying to get a job. And everyone will have to do an interview at some point. So whether it is your students that are, leaving high school, going straight into the workforce, or if they're going to college, if they're looking for scholarships or internships, or, some clubs will require internships. So everyone will have to do one at some point. And it really is great at teaching students some really important skills. It requires them to be able to listen and think about the question, be able to focus on it, to be able to put together their answer. Obviously has a lot to do with communicating effectively, making sure they can get their point across. And a lot of times helps them with thinking on their feet. And especially when we're looking at our younger kiddos, but even for high school, it also can help to foster a positive classroom culture as we work to get to know other people. The more you understand people, typically the more that you'll be able to get along or at least understand what's going on with them. So I'm going to pass it over now. Oops, that's not what I wanted. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to pass it over now to Anna, who will share her screen and we'll take it away from here. Please feel free throughout. If you have questions, you can go ahead and put those in the chat. We will make sure that we address those at the end. But if something comes up throughout, please feel free to go ahead and put it in there.
Hi, good morning. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm seeing a nod, so that's good. That's all a good sign. I'm so sorry joining a little bit late. Everybody loves technology, don't we? So I'm gonna share my screen. It's also that time in the morning where I get this like sun glare. So if you see me waving back and forth, I'm just trying to battle the sun out of my eyes. Don't we all love that? So thank you all so much for having me. I was truly honored to be able to present in front of such a talented and impactful group of individuals. Completely honest, I usually present to college age students. So this is like a fun treat for me to be able to talk with other adults and really hopefully share some stories back and forth. I'm really curious to learn all more about you too. So as As we said, interviewing is a conversation, and I'd really like to have this presentation also be a conversation. So if you do have questions, feel free to drop those in. I'd be happy to just kind of pause where we're at and, talk through those situations or questions. But yeah, I'm so happy to be here. And I also wanted to say how much I appreciate you all. You probably have one of the hardest jobs out there. And I am also a mother of a high schooler, a middle schooler, and soon to be kindergartner. So I know how much of an impact you all have. And saying thank you is not enough. So you guys are amazing. I do want to share a little bit about myself before we jump in. My name is Anna Anderson. I'm a talent acquisition specialist at MSU Federal Credit Union. I've worked in HR for about 15 years. I absolutely love what I get to do every day. Helping people is really my nature, and probably similar in your nature too. And I've spent the last about 10 years focusing in talent acquisition. So finding talent and really finding their home. I really like to say we filter people in, we don't filter people out. So we find individuals and we find the right spot for them is kind of how I view my career. I mentioned I have some children too, so I do like to test out some of my strategies on them, whether they like it or not. So they are my fun little guinea pigs. I have a daughter in high school. She's in the marching band, which is so much fun. This is our first year. I have a son also joined the band this year. He's just talented. And then my wild 5-year-old or soon to be 5-year-old, he keeps me on my toes. He is the definite one that is crazy. So what would life be without him? I have no idea. I got my undergrad at Davenport University when online was not as common. So I was doing online school while working and getting some experience during the 2007 era when the market was also kind of scary. I remember I was driving and going to school at $4 a gallon, and that was not fun because I was commuting. So all of my money went into the gas tank. But I do also want to start with just a few disclaimers too about this presentation. This is from the point of view of hiring within industry, right? I think you all know that interviewing processes may look different in an academia environment, and this is all from the point of view of industry. So there may be differences. I can try to speak to the point of like an academic point of view. I do not come from that space, so I can give you my honest opinion. But I do want to let you know that this is from the point of view of like industry standard. This is also my own point of view. What I appreciate is every recruiter out there, we all have different ideas, different recommendations. And these are things that I have learned in the past and throughout my career. So you may hear different things from other individuals. And I think it's always important to gather more point of views, but I just want to let you know that this is coming from me as an individual. And I also want to share too, you will notice throughout the presentation, I did try to simplify my deck. It's not because I know that you all are not educated adults, because I know you are. But I tried to convey how it's important to break down such a process that can be complicated, that can be stressful and nerve-wracking, and how we can help students and young professionals break those down to make it less intensive and less maybe intimidating as a process. So there is a goal in mind, and I also hope that maybe it also stems some conversation too. So without further ado, let's see if I can get this working, maybe. There we go. So today what I want to do is I want to talk about preparing for interviews, what to expect maybe throughout the interview process, things like, the interview formats, what type of interviews are out there, what kind of assessments are out there, maybe the types of questions that may be asked, structuring responses, how do I know if I'm giving good responses, and then how to close out an interview. So those are some of the key areas that I'm going to go over today, that I hope that maybe you all can take a few bits of learning today. So preparing for an interview, I think we all know that maybe there's a few core and common steps that we should remind these young professionals, these students, the importance of, right? I think the exciting of, oh my gosh, I submitted an application, I got a call for an interview, the adrenaline is there, but now it's like, oh shoot, now I need to do my homework. And what are those homework pieces? And we all know researching is one of those important things. So understanding what is it that I'm jumping into. So did I actually read the job description? I'm hoping they did, but sometimes job postings can get long. So do I understand the scope of the job? Do I know who I'm talking to? So did that person who set up the interview, did they tell me, am I going to be meeting with the store manager? Am I going to be meeting with HR? And also, did I learn about maybe the culture? Is there things that is important to me that maybe, giving back to the community is something that this person really enjoys volunteering? And is that something that can be supported by the employer? So taking those steps is really important and also can build confidence. When you think about, the psychological needs of these individuals, there's a lot of emotions and feelings when you're preparing for an interview. It's very rare to hear someone say, I was not nervous for an interview. I'm proud of that person if they are, but I think there's always going to be a level of nerves, and nerves are a good thing too. I think that means that this interview and this position is important to you. So there is a healthy level of nerves, but things like research and what you can do to prepare for an interview can help reduce that. And I think when you think about nerves, there's a wide variety, right? And as you as educators too, and how you can influence and impact those lives, you probably have maybe relationships or ways to connect with students, knowing, so what are those triggers? What are those nervous points? Is it meeting new people? Is it not feeling comfortable speaking in front of people? Or is it not feeling prepared? So how do we break down what are those barriers to help them feel better? Preparing questions, I think is just supported along with that research. So what is it for me? So what kind of training am I going to get? How are you going to support me during school? Are there going to be ways that I can have time off so I can prepare for exams? I think these are all things that students really should think about ahead of time that maybe sometimes they don't. And that's okay, because maybe they just don't think of these things because they're so excited about getting a paycheck. They're excited about, moving into adulthood. And then comes into play those practice. I think everyone can always practice. And again, I think it can come from different ways of how does this individual need to prepare? Is it practicing by writing down their thoughts? Is it practicing by looking in a mirror? Is it practicing by timing yourself? Or is it practicing by finding a friend's parent because maybe they're not used to talking in front of people they're not used to? So I think, again, we have to understand what are the psychological needs and what are those safety areas that we need to make those individuals feel comfortable in order to be successfully ready in an interview. Sorry, I love technology. Hang on. If I could just, there we go. All right, next slide. So interview formats. There are a variety of interview formats out there. These are just some of the common interview formats that you may see throughout anywhere you could go. Now, not all of these are interview formats that we may use at the credit union, but I just wanted to share, what these individuals could expect. And really kind of what the differences are and maybe tips that you can share would be helpful in different environments. And hopefully, as a good HR representative or the individual that's hiring will give this information to the student how they will be interviewing. And if not, we want to encourage those individuals to go back and say, okay, my interview setup, is this over the phone? Is this in person? So that way, again, there's more of those research and that preparation ready to go. So in-person interviews, I think we've all experienced that probably in our career because, within the last few years, everything all of a sudden has gone remote. And so virtual interviews are kind of the newer things. So many of us have probably experienced an in-person interview. These are more the traditional face-to-face. Candidates can meet the interviewers in person, oftentimes can see the workplace and the environment, which is really neat and cool. I personally like that. Maybe tips for preparation here, dress for the job you want. I don't ever want to say that you have to be professional, because professionalism is different to everyone. So go to an interview the way you feel confident, the way that expresses yourself. And then also practice good body language. So if that means, not slouching down, that doesn't mean closing your eyes, trying to make effort to make eye contact. Eye contact can also be very uncomfortable. So that could also be something that maybe you want to practice ahead of time. But again, understanding those emotional needs. You may have individuals who are neurodivergent. And maybe eye contact is something that they're not comfortable with, and that's okay. So how do you make that a comfortable environment for them? The virtual interviews, again, these are becoming more and more popular. This is also something that is much more popular at the credit union, as were in-person interviews a while ago. Most of my experience now is in virtual interviews. I'm sorry, I didn't share this earlier, but most of my recruiting now is in the IT technical space. So I hire a lot of remote employees. So I do a lot of virtual interviews. So of course, these are going to be held over different platforms. Zoom, like we are on today. The credit union, we actually use Microsoft Teams. There's WebEx out there. There's so many platforms. Don't you all wish it could just be consolidated into one? That would be amazing. But we know technology, that's not the way it works. So tips, again, testing out the technology, finding a quiet space where maybe there's not distractions, where you don't have roommates running behind you, or anything like that where you feel like it could maybe throw you off, right? We want to make sure that these individuals can give their full attention. We also have a one-way interview. This is not a common practice at the credit union. I was telling Samantha earlier, there's a lot of interesting things out there about, AI in the virtual interview space. Not a practice we've adopted yet, but maybe in the future we may. But these are going to be a recorded session. So individuals will log into this space and they will have set questions that they will be asked. And then typically there is a time limit. Sometimes there's not, but usually they want, like, within 5 minutes, I want you to answer this question. So ways to prepare for this, again, using the time on your side and, focusing on commonly asked questions to improve your confidence in front of the camera. Again, another distraction-free environment is also really helpful. So that way you can be focused on the question and giving your full attention. We also have panel interviews. This is a practice that the credit union uses typically in final rounds, where we have different stakeholders involved. So usually we try not to have more than 4, otherwise it gets pretty intimidating when you have multiple sets of eyes on you. So we try to limit that. But this is where, you may have multiple people in one setting interviewing you as one person. This is where it's helpful if you can research those who are in the meeting with you. Again, I don't anticipate a lot of times having panel interviews for younger adults, depending on the role, whether it's a part-time position, a full-time internship, a club, something like this. Doesn't happen very often, but it could. And so understanding who's in that space with you is really helpful, because then the student knows, okay, I know I can ask a peer question to this individual where this person could be a leader. So how do I maybe ask questions that are more appropriate to that person? So really understanding more of your space is helpful in that environment. We also see group interviews out in industries. Not a practice that we use at the credit union, but this is going to be a space where you have multiple interviewees and maybe 1 or 2 interviewers. So it's kind of flipped on the other side. So this is also very interesting practice. because you can kind of see and listen and learn from other peer interviewees what their responses may be. So this is where you can also kind of shine some of your soft skills. How do you hold a conversation with other people? How do you allow people time, not speaking over people? So it's a little bit more focused on how you interact with peers, essentially, and how you can support working in a team environment. And then last but not least, we have our phone interview. And that is a practice at the credit union that we use just to kind of get some of those initial conversations out, where, you know, we look for the basic minimum requirements. Phone interviews are typically shorter than most other interviews. We usually have them only about 30 minutes, where most other interviews could be up to an hour, maybe more sometimes. Phone interviews, again, those, what's helpful is, you know, making sure that, you know, is your cell phone charged, or do you have a good contact that we can call this individual at? You'd be surprised how many times that maybe we call a parent's phone number and the parent didn't even know, right? And the parent's like, what's happening? So having a good contact, having that communication, there's nothing wrong with calling a parent's cell phone if that's the best, if that's the best contact, but really, you know, setting yourself up for success and being ready and available. So again, you'll see a wide variety of different interviews out there, interview formats. I think, in my opinion, you know, when you're interviewing at a high school level or even in the college level, depending on the job, it may be complex, it may be pretty quick. It really all depends on the job that they're applying to. But again, the more the student can ask questions about, tell me more about this interview process, the more it will benefit them, their confidence in how they can prepare, but also have insight, like, what can I expect from this? So that way they know the time that they need to commit, whether assessments are also a thing that's out there. I'm not sure if any of you have had experience using an assessment before. It is not a common practice at the credit union to use assessments, but I wanted to throw it in here just to share that this could be something that individuals could experience. And there's a wide variety of assessments out there. Sometimes you'll find personality assessments if they're looking for, maybe they're looking for a sales background and they need someone who's comfortable speaking in front of people. Something like that, where they need a certain skill set or a certain soft skill to do well in the role. There's also skills-based or cognitive. So is there something, maybe they're going to test your Excel skills because they need someone that's comfortable using a database. So they may measure that, or maybe they're going to measure how well individuals can count money. So they're going to have maybe specific assessments. And I also want to know, assessments can be online. They can also be in person. Sometimes they may have like a role playing, like, okay, I'm going to set this in front of you and this is what we're going to do, just to see how this individual can work through the situation. There may also be technical assessments. So I know in the industry, in the technical industry, you know, they like to see, can this person code? You know, what's going to be the outcome? There may also be customized assessments. So if there's maybe a specific skill that this individual needs to have, that they need to, that the interviewer knows that that they need to have in order to be successful in the role, they may have that as well. So again, another good one, I mentioned like the skill-based, maybe it's like an Excel assessment of that nature. Or maybe it's language. Maybe if it's a bilingual individual, maybe they need to ensure that can you carry a conversation, or what is your level of proficiency? Interview questions. Questions, there are so many different ones. And I think this is probably one of the biggest maybe stressors that people come into because you don't know what is going to be asked of you. And um, and what I stress the most of this is before students even dive into what questions or how do I answer questions, I would really encourage students, yourself, even parents, knowing what questions are legal and what questions are not legal. I think sometimes maybe young adults don't know like what can be asked. And sadly, there are some times when illegal questions are asked, and knowing when to protect themselves and their rights as an individual. And this is where you as educators and mentors can help with that. So what's an illegal question? Like, what is your marital status, or things of that nature that doesn't really need to impact the interview or the qualifications of the individual. So I would make sure that, even before talking about like, so how do I answer this question? Is this an appropriate question? And if not, how do I get us back on track to say, well, I don't feel like this is something that I want to share at this point, but I'd love to go back and tell you more about how I meet the qualifications. And sometimes that can be a hard conversation when you're young and you don't really know, like, is this okay to say? So this is something that I constantly work with, even with my kids, knowing when it is an appropriate time to ask a question and how do you get the conversation back on track in a healthy manner, so you feel comfortable moving forward in a conversation. And I think when you think about that point of view, this can be utilized in areas outside of interviewing. And that's how I try to teach my kids too. Like, if you have a friend that's making you maybe feel uncomfortable with the topic, okay, so how do you say, maybe we hold this conversation for another time, or when someone else is present, and we'll come back to that. And I think those are common practices that can build that confidence again, to know where can I safeguard myself, and how do I know that I can confidently say, I'd like to not discuss this at this point. So again, some of these things are confidence building, but also awareness pieces. So getting back to the types of interview questions, there are very much traditional questions. In my opinion, I think the hardest question out there is, tell me about yourself. Because a lot of people get stumped, and because we don't talk about ourselves every day, right? Our friends and families, they know us. We don't go up to our friends and just say, hi, I'm Anna. I live in Grand Ledge, Michigan. So this is the one that I think that individuals can practice the most. And when we think about interviewing, and when we think about our questions, this is all storytelling. This is, how do we convey a concept in the way of a story, in which every time I share that with a college student, a lot of times they're like, oh, like, and it takes some of that pressure off, right? Because you're like, oh, I need to say everything. But if you think about it, this is a conversation, this is a story that I want to share. Sometimes it can alleviate, right? Because we know ourselves and we know our confidence, and we like to tell stories, or most of us, maybe not all of us like to. But I think sometimes framing it from different point of views is also really helpful. So traditional questions are going to, explore that individual's background, their career goals, just general questions. Tell me about yourself, walk me through your resume, walk me through your experience. How will this position help you with your career goals? Maybe it's, I want to get a job because I want to go to, I want to start working on my career experience, or I'm in high school and I want to make more money, and I want to learn more about what it's like working in a working environment. And that can be as simple as that, or maybe it's, I want to go to college, and this is going to help me. If I go work in a nursing home, I want to go to in the medical field. So there's a lot of ways that I think individuals may put a lot of pressure on themselves, especially as young adults when they don't have a lot of experience. But I think, it's the transparency and the understanding too that, these interviews aren't going to expect years and upon years of experience too. So I think, again, it kind of plays back to that confidence piece. There's also technical questions. These are going to be much more specific on an individual's knowledge or skill related of the job. So for instance, someone might say like, how would you approach maybe a technical task? So in your case, how would you approach setting up a lesson plan? So this is where you're going to see those step-by-steps, right? That individuals in the academic field would know how to answer. If you ask me how to write out a lesson plan, I would be like, well, let me go Google this. Because it's not going to be something that is vague enough to be able to be asked to every single person. It's going to be very specific to that individual's career in that position. So just remembering what are your technical concepts of the role, what is your experience, the skills relevant that you have, and also remembering those problem solving skills. And when you think about it from a lens of a young adult, you know, what were some of the things that you interacted with your classmates when you worked on a project? Or how did you balance your time at home when you had chores and homework? Or things of that nature. When you think about problem solving, it can be in different environments as well. Situational questions, these are going to be more like hypothetical scenarios. So really understanding like, how would you react? Sometimes these are going to be a little bit more direct, again, in more entry level type positions. So it's not going to be like, tell me about a time when you worked with a team. It's typically questions like, tell me about a time when you worked in a fast-paced environment while providing customer service. So for instance, you can say like, oh, okay, well, this makes sense because I'm applying to a job at McDonald's, or I'm applying to a retail job or something like that. So it's going to be a lot more situational, but also focused on the role itself. So how will the student be able to apply the skills that they've learned inside and outside the classroom into a position like this? And then we also have behavioral style questions. And this is going to assess the candidate's past behavior to predict, again, kind of future performance, engage those soft skills. So not necessarily tell me how you worked in a team, but describe a challenging situation. Tell me about how you contributed to an effective team. So these are going to be much more soft skill based, but also understanding. So what was the situation? There are going to be some hard skills layered in there, but more focused on how did you react in that situation, and how could you react in a situation similar in this setting? There are a variety of questions at the credit union that we ask. A lot of the traditional questions are vetted out in that initial phone interview. And then you'll see the technical situation and behavioral style questions vetted throughout, maybe later in the process. So that's also something that we actually provide like an interviewing with MSU FCU tips guide anytime we interact with an individual beyond the phone screen to prep our candidates. So that way they know what type of questions we ask, how they can prepare. So that is something that I recommend too. Again, as these individuals are asking questions, help me learn more about the interview process. They can ask, what kind of questions can I expect? So that way they know, how do I prepare? What are situations that I can try and think of in my head? So they feel confident that they don't feel like they're just going to be drilled on everything they know. I think that that's one common misconception, that they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a cashier. They're going to ask me how much I can multiply, divide, add, and that's not always the case. I often will remind young adults that as you build your career, it's not always the technical information that you know, it's sometimes those soft skills. So how do you work as a team? How do you take on new challenges? How do you learn? Because we can teach the hard skills, It's a lot more challenging to teach the soft skills. So with that, I think questions, they're always going to be something that, can you always prepare for? Probably not. But I think thinking about it from the lens of this is a story, and let me tell you about myself. And there is nothing wrong too if students need to hear it rephrased or repeated. I think a lot of times we might start off answering something and then feeling like, oh my gosh, am I even on the right track? So I think having that confidence to know when is it okay to re-ask, and also feeling comfortable knowing that you're also interviewing them, right? Which kind of leads into like the responses. There are so many different formats out there how to respond to questions, what's right, what's wrong. The credit union, we utilize the STAR method. And I also like to tell people this is just a baseline. We will never go back to someone and say, oh my gosh, you didn't tell us the T part. Go back and tell us the task. I think there's a lot of pressure on people to be like, okay, what is the situation? What is it? This is a framework to help people organize thoughts. And I think it is super beneficial, even if there are more frameworks out there that maybe they resonate more, go for those. There is nothing wrong with using, like there's, I think there's a WHO method, there's a CAR and a PAR method. Utilize those if you feel like that makes most sense for you. But this is something that I think helps organize the story, organize your thoughts. So as you prepare and think about the questions that are being asked, how does this help me share that experience? It also, what it does too, it helps individuals share details of their story. I think sometimes when we get nervous, two things happen. We either say 2 words or we give a 20-minute answer. And that's where it gets kind of hard. So I think utilizing this to structure your response, but also giving that detail. That's a huge piece of feedback that I give to individuals. Give the detail. We need to know who was involved. What did you do? What was the situation? So the more practice that this individual can have and hear that, hey, I like this response. How can you go back and give me more detail? So a lot of those mock interviews too, if your students can engage in those, I go out to, I think it's the Eaton ISD. Oh my gosh, don't tell them if I can't remember this. But I'll go out and I help some with their students too. And sometimes it's just hearing that, like, that was a good start, go back, add more. So that practice there and that positive encouragement too, knowing that this is a good start. It's kind of like writing an essay, right? You have to keep drafting and you have to keep building on it. And as Samantha said, practice is only going to make perfect, and we continuously get better throughout our career. And then finally, closing the interview. Again, this is where we come in and we get to ask our questions. I always like to empower individuals, like you are interviewing us just as much as we are interviewing you. So this is where you get to come in and be the subject matter expert. And this is where, again, I think that confidence gets to build up. You get to ask me what you want to know. And I think there's so many questions that people can ask, and that if you want, I can give out lists of questions, but I think it really should be personalized based on the student and what they're looking for and what they're hoping to get out of the role. Understanding those next steps again. So what is expected of me? Am I going to be interviewing more? Should I wait? A lot of times people will close out an interview and then the next day call and say, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Where are things? And we're like, oh, we're still interviewing, or we haven't made decisions yet. So trust the process. But if it's been a week, that's when I say, once you gather that contact information, send an email, or maybe a week later call and say, hey, I haven't heard. Hopefully that's not the process, or that's not the experience, because I always like to make sure that, candidates know where things are at, regardless if it's a yes, let's move forward, or no, maybe not this time. But I do think it's important to have that contact. because they can also use that to build their networks. I don't expect a lot of high schoolers to have LinkedIn's yet, but hopefully that's something they're working towards. College age students, I think that's really a skill set that we're starting to get down. So building up those networks, I think the discouraging thing is sometimes those networks, you don't see the fruits of your labor right away. But later in your career, I think many of us can agree that we can go out to LinkedIn and we can utilize this network and our peers for career related topics, but also, hey, I want to get your opinion on this. What do you think? I don't know if I've ever reached out to someone on LinkedIn that didn't offer help. So gathering that contact information for use of right now, but also for future too. So I know our time is winding down, so I'm sorry. I want to make sure that there's time for Q&A if there is anything. I am going to send like a detailed report. So if you're taking notes, you're wonderful. But I want to make sure that you all have this written out. So if you want to refer back to something, I'll also give out my contact information if you're like, hey, I have a question on this. I can give you my honest opinion. Again, this is all my point of view. If you hear things done differently and you like it that way, go for it. But I think interviewing is very personalized, and it's very much everyone's own unique experience. But I'm hopeful that you all can give that confidence and encouragement to these students as they begin their early careers, and hopefully help them get on the right track.
Thank you, Anna. And if it's okay, I want to flip back to the implementation piece. If people have questions, go ahead and put those into the chat and we'll take a look at those and we'll come back in just a minute. But I just want to make sure that we get to kind of the implementation piece as well. So I'm going to reshare my screen here. Oops, not that one. And again, go ahead and put any questions you have in the chat. But just to kind of bring it home. So like you've got this great information. Now what can you really do with it? So thinking about our elementary kiddos, obviously they're not going out and applying for jobs or anything. But again, remembering that it's an important learned skill. So interviewing can happen in a lot of different formats. A lot of elementary schools do things where they're like, learn about your peers. They'll have, a student interview another student. No, it's not trying to get them anything, but it gets them used to asking questions, listening to questions, and figuring out how to respond and give information about themselves. Having them interview an important person in their life. So whether that's a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, another important adult in their life. One, helpful to learn about like careers and things like that. But also, again, gives them those good skills, learning how to tell them about themselves. I love this. A few of our schools have been having students interview and like apply for class jobs or for leadership positions. So asking them, a couple of questions about what would make them good for a specific position. How are they a good line leader? What makes them a good class librarian? What skills do they have? Again, just getting them kind of familiar with the terminology, and again, being able to talk about themselves. Having students apply for an interview for positions on things like a student council, or if you have like representatives from each grade that meet with the principal or whatever, having them like interview for those positions to be able to talk about their skills. So just some examples of types of questions that they might ask, whether it's each other, whether it's asking those important people in their lives. And we are happy to give you any resources. So if you're like, yeah, I'd love to implement this, but I don't know where to start, we can definitely either find or create materials for you to use in your schools. Or if teachers want something, we can definitely get that to them as well. Looking at our middle and high schoolers, again, interviews can still happen in many of those different formats. So again, some of those kind of basic skills about interviewing other people. But just remembering that beyond jobs, interviewing is an important skill, but beginning to focus more on the specifics of an interview. So particularly when we get to our high school kiddos, as they're really starting to think about applying for part-time jobs. Like, yes, even if you're working at McDonald's, you will have some type of interview. So just being prepared for that and really starting to work on the mechanics of interviewing. Really focusing on how to answer those typical questions like Anna mentioned. And there are tons and tons and tons of lists out there of typical interview questions. Again, if you want us to like curate a list for you, happy to do that. But really some important things, getting students used to talking about their strengths and weaknesses. That will come up in most interviews. And again, it's an important life skill. Also helping them learn how to articulate their goals. So again, they're interviewing for a position at McDonald's. How does that help in their future career? Whether they're looking to work directly after high school, even if that's like, I want to work at McDonald's and I want to become a store manager someday. Or if it's, I want to start getting some experience so that I can go to college to get this future job. But really starting to help them articulate what those specific goals are. And especially thinking for our middle school kiddos, still making it interactive. So even if you do activities like using a beach ball where you're, throwing it around and you have questions on it for them to answer, or having them play Jenga where you write, questions on it for them to pull from, and, work with peers and answer questions. If you, print out a game board and have them roll a die and, whatever square they land on, they answer those questions, things like that. Again, it's just really getting them used to talking about themselves because, like Anna said, we don't typically go up to our friends at school and say, "Hello, my name is Samantha. I do XYZ. I work at this. I do this, 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 this." But that's really all an interview is. Again, it's a conversation. So it's just getting them used to saying these things about themselves. I know that was like super quick on the implementation piece. Again, for any of our schools that are in Kent ISD, I'm happy to get you connected to your consultant if you want any additional resources, want to talk about how to implement it. If you're outside of the ISD, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to share any resources with you as well. We also have lots of schools everywhere from, again, like our elementary school to high school that do things like mock interview events or bring in, employers to talk to students about it. We are happy to help coordinate those things as well. So please feel free to reach out if we can be of any assistance for any of those things as well. So for those who, oh, we have a few minutes left. Okay, so any questions? I didn't see anything come up in the chat yet. You can also feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask Anna any questions. Anything. And again, you will get copies of the recording and the PowerPoints after this. All right. I'm not seeing any questions. I've got just like a couple kind of closing slides. If you do have a question, feel free to still throw it in there. So just wanted to make sure to mention our upcoming professional development events. So we do have two more in this series. The next one will be about social media do's and don'ts. So we'll be talking all things social media, but also we'll talk a little bit about LinkedIn, which I think you've heard about in both of these now. And then the last one, we're going to be talking about networking and informational interviews. We also are continuing our college prep series. Our next session on that is in February. And that one will be focused on HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutions, Asian American, Pacific Islander serving institutions, tribal colleges, all of that. And then we got two more in that series. And I did just see a question come in. We've got our Career Readiness Network. Our next session is next week, and that will be comparing and contrasting careers in healthcare. So we've got a really awesome panel lined up for that to help you really understand the nuances between, the differences in some of the different jobs that are within healthcare. January, we've got a session on career zones in the military. So not only like about the military, but also what are the types of jobs that students can have in the military. And then the last one is administrators in industry. So really focused on principals, assistant principals, curriculum directors, taking them out to businesses to kind of see, what the working world looks like. Okay, so question from Susan. When you indicated students should dress comfortably, do you put some parameters on that? They may be interviewing with people of other generations that think differently.
Good question. Yes, the generations, I love them. So when I say dress comfortable, I think there's a few different elements there. I I think dress the way you feel confident, dress the way, dress for the job you want. And that could also mean like, okay, so I want to get a job at Target. So how are they dressing there? You can also ask the interviewer, what's the best attire? So I like to have people know, and I think maybe this is a culture piece at the credit union. Like we are very much inclusive and we want a place of belonging. So I don't want people to feel like they have to fit a certain mold. So if they want to come in with purple hair and dressed the way that's appropriate and confident, then that's great. But I also feel like you don't want to dress too comfortably, so if you're wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, maybe that's not the right attire, right? So I think there's a healthy balance of what is the job that you want, how do you feel confident being you, and also if you're not comfortable, if you feel like that's not right, I think it's okay asking. My coworker actually just asked me the other day, they're like, my son's gonna be graduating college. My husband really thinks we should buy him a suit. And I was like, I don't think he needs a suit. Unless you really want to, unless he really, really wants to. I was like, out of college, I don't know very many professions that you need to go interview in a suit in. So I said, if he likes the professional attire, maybe grab like a sports jacket and like a pair of khakis. So that way he feels confident. I was like, but I don't want him to feel like, again, he needs to fit a mold if that's not something he's comfortable in.
I also would always tell students to, like, if the interviewer gives them specific instructions, make sure they follow those instructions. So,
Right.
um, in my previous role, I worked with a lot of tech students, and Amazon would always tell us that when they were interviewing tech students, they told them like dress casually. And so if a student came in a full suit, they were like, okay, clearly they didn't listen to instructions. So, just making sure that you, are looking at the company culture, looking at what other people wear. You do want to look and feel your best, but again, following directions is important as well. Oops, sorry. All right, any other questions? I don't think I saw anything in the chat. Again, you've got my email. It sounds like Anna's okay if I share her email, so I'll share that with you as well, along with the slides and the recording and everything. But again, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out, or if there's anything I can do to help you, more than happy to provide resources or help, brainstorm, think through like how to use this information with your students. All right, and we are right on time somehow. So thank you all so much for joining us. Again, feel free to reach out. We appreciate you all being here today. Hopefully you found this information helpful to be able to use with your students. So have a great rest of your day.